안녕하세요.
The luxurious building of Young Corporation dominated Seoul's skyline, reflecting the grandeur of its CEO, Young Tae-woo. Known for his cold demeanor and inflexibility, he ruled his business with an iron fist, feared by both competitors and his own employees. Yoon-ha Ri, on the other hand, was just one among the hundreds of employees working under his command. But she was not like the others. When she witnessed injustices within the company, she did not hesitate to speak up. Her anonymous testimony leaked to the press, causing a scandal that placed Tae-woo at the center of public scrutiny. However, Ha-ri never expected that. Just days later, she would be summoned directly to the CEO's office. As she stepped into the vast minimalist room, she found Tae-woo seated at his desk, holding a tablet displaying the damning article. Yoon-ha Ri, his voice was controlled, but filled with restrained fury. "Do you have anything to say about this?" She took a deep breath. "I only told the truth." He set the tablet down and rose from his seat. "The truth? You tarnished my reputation with your so-called truth? Do you really think you can do this without facing consequences?" Ha-ri didn't back down. "I'm not the type to be intimidated. If what I did was wrong, fire me." Tae-woo smirked, but it was not a friendly smile. "Number, that would be too easy for you. I want you to see with your own eyes how wrong you were. From now on, you will work directly under my command." Shock crossed her face, but before she could protest, he continued, "Let's see how long you can last by my side, Yoon-ha Ri." She met his gaze head-on. "I can endure far more than you think, Mr. Jung." The silence between them crackled with tension, and in that moment, both knew this was not just a battle for power. It was the beginning of something much bigger. That same night, Ha-ri reflected on everything that had happened. Seated in a quiet cafe in the heart of the city, her phone vibrated incessantly with messages from coworkers, all eager to know about her confrontation with the CEO. She ignored the notifications, staring at the steaming cup of coffee in front of her. Working directly with Yoon Tae-woo meant she would be under his constant surveillance. But it also meant she would have the chance to confront him up close to, prove that her voice would not be silenced. On the other side of the city, Tae-woo was also deep in thought. From the heights of his penthouse, he gazed at the distant lights of Seoul, his mind restless. He had never allowed an employee to challenge him this way, and yet something about Yoon-ha Ri's defiance intrigued him. She was not just an ordinary employee. She was a problem, and problems needed to be solved. The next morning dawned with tension in the air. At the office, all eyes were on Ha-ri as she stepped into the company headquarters. Some whispered, others observed in silence, but she held her head high. If Tae-woo wanted to test her, she would be ready for the challenge. Upon reaching the executive floor, she found her new workspace, her desk, positioned directly in front of Tae-woo's office, a clear reminder that he would always be watching her. As she finally sat down, her screen blinked with a new email, a direct message from Tae-woo. "Our first day together. I hope you're up to the task." Ha-ri smirked. If he wanted a battle of endurance, he was about to find out that she played this game just as well as he did. Yoon-ha Ri arrived early at the office, ready to face her first day under the direct supervision of young Tae-woo. The executive floor was silent, except for the rhythmic sound of keys as she replied to emails and organized her schedule. What she didn't expect was that her first challenge would come so quickly. A few minutes later, Tae-woo's office door opened. He stepped out with his usual cold gaze and handed Ha-ri a document. "I want this report reviewed and delivered by noon. Don't waste my time with mistakes." His voice was firm, leaving no room for questions. Ha-ri took the document, keeping a neutral expression. Understood. As she read through the pages, something bothered her. There were inconsistencies in the presented data values that didn't make sense. It was a small discrepancy, but enough to raise suspicions. Without hesitation, she walked to Tae-woo's office. "Mr. Jung, I reviewed the document, but I found some errors in the numbers. It might be best to check with the finance team before we send it out." Her voice was professional, but there was a hint of challenge in her tone. Tae-woo lifted his eyes from his computer screen, studying her for a moment. Are you suggesting that my team made a mistake, he asked, raising an eyebrow. Ha-ri held her stance. I'm suggesting that we avoid problems before they happen. He stared at her for a few seconds before taking the document from her hands and flipping through it. After a long silence, he let out a sigh and pressed a button on his phone. Bring me the financial reports immediately. Ha-ri didn't move. For the first time, she felt that Tae-woo saw her as more than just a rebellious employee. Well thought out, Yoon Ha-ri, he said without looking up. But don't expect praise every time. She allowed herself a faint smile, knowing she had won a small victory. But something told her there was much more ahead. Later, as she organized other documents, Ha-ri overheard murmurs among the employees on the floor. Her name was whispered between them. Some remarked on how she had stood up to the CEO on her very first day. Others doubted she would last long under his supervision. When she returned to her desk, she found a new email in her inbox. It was from Tae-woo. Shareholders meeting at 3 p.m. I want you there. Be prepared. Ha-ri stared at the screen for a moment, feeling the growing pressure. If he wanted her in that meeting, it meant the challenge was just beginning. She took a deep breath and started preparing. Upon entering the conference room, she found Tae-woo already seated at the head of the table, surrounded by the company's directors. As soon as Ha-ri sat down, he gave her a brief but intense look. Gentlemen, I present to you the new direct assistant to the presidency, Yoon Ha-ri. I expect you to take her suggestions into consideration, as she is now part of the company's major decisions. The shock was evident. Ha-ri felt all eyes on her. Tae-woo had just placed her at the center of attention. If she wanted to prove her worth, she would have to be ready for anything. The shareholders' meeting was more challenging than Ha-ri had expected. Although she had prepared, the skeptical look she received made her realize that being competent was not enough. She had to prove that she deserved to be there. Tae-woo, on the other hand, maintained his cold and impassive expression throughout the presentation. But at one moment, when one of the directors interrupted her, questioning her capability, he was quick to respond. If Yoon Ha-ri were not qualified, she wouldn't be in this room. I suggest we end this discussion and focus on what truly matters. The room fell silent. Ha-ri couldn't tell if that was a defense or just a strategy for Tae-woo to reaffirm his authority, but the effect was immediate. The directors turned their attention back to what mattered, and the meeting continued without further interruptions. Later, back at the office, Ha-ri sat at her desk, feeling the weight of the day. Before she could reflect on it, she received an email from Tae-woo. You did well today, but the real challenge hasn't even begun. She stared at the screen for a moment and smiled slightly. If he wanted a game of appearances, he was about to find out that she knew how to play as well. The next morning, Ha-ri found an envelope on her desk. Inside, there was an invitation to an important corporate event, signed by Tae-woo. Mandatory presence, said the attached note. Throughout the day, she noticed even more curious glances from her colleagues. The rumors that Tae-woo was putting her at the center of company decisions were spreading fast, sparking speculation. During a coffee break, a coworker approached her. You must be special to him to be taken to an event like this so early on, she said with a half smile. Ha-ri kept her expression neutral. Maybe he just wants to test me. The coworker raised an eyebrow. Or maybe he's testing himself. When the night of the event arrived, Ha-ri found herself facing a new challenge. The gala hall was filled with high-level executives and investors. Tae-woo looked impeccable in his suit, greeting guests as if every movement had been rehearsed. When his eyes met hers, for a brief moment, something in his expression changed. But he quickly composed himself and walked toward her. Don't make me regret bringing you here, Yoon Ha-ri. His voice was low, but heavy with intention. Ha-ri smirked slightly. Don't worry, Mr. Jung, I know exactly what I'm doing. They stared at each other for a moment before Tae-woo gestured toward where she should stand. The night was only just beginning, and both knew that the real game of appearances was yet to come. As she moved through the hall, Ha-ri realized that her presence had a bigger impact than she had anticipated. Many guests observed her son with curiosity, others with suspicion. However, one man in particular approached her, an influential investor who seemed genuinely interested in her. Miss Yoon, It's a pleasure to finally meet you. I've heard a lot about your swift rise within the company. He smiled politely. Hari maintained a professional posture. Thank you. I'm just doing my job to the best of my ability. The man raised his wine glass. If I may say so, your presence here is a sign that things are changing at Young Corporation. I wonder if that change is for the better. Before Hari could respond, Tae-woo appeared beside her, his presence as commanding as ever. Young Corporation is always striving to evolve, and Yoon Hari is an essential part of that growth. His voice was firm, his intent clear. He did not want anyone questioning her presence there. The investor gave a slight smile, evaluating Tae-woo before raising his glass in a toast. I see. Then I look forward to witnessing this evolution firsthand. After he walked away, Hari crossed her arms and looked at Tae-woo. Any particular reason you intervened? I thought you knew I could handle myself. He stepped a little closer, his expression unchanged. I know you can, but that doesn't mean I'm not paying attention. She felt her heart quicken for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. Don't get used to it, Mr. Young. I'm not part of your game just yet. He smirked slightly. We'll see. The event had ended, but its repercussions still echoed within Young Corporation. In the hallways, speculation grew about the closeness between Tae-woo and Hari. Some saw it as a strategic move by the CEO, while others believed there was something more. The next day, Hari entered the office determined to ignore the rumors. But as she opened her inbox, she found an anonymous email with an attachment. The subject line was direct. Do you really know young Tae-woo? Opening the file, Hari was met with old documents, newspaper articles, and corporate records. Something wasn't right. Tae-woo's name appeared linked to a shady transaction from years ago, a secret deal that directly impacted the future of the company. Without hesitation, Hari took the documents to Tae-woo. He was reviewing reports when she stormed into the room, placing the papers on his desk. What does this mean? She asked, without preamble. Tae-woo looked at the documents, his expression unchanged. For a moment, only silence filled the room. Then, he closed his eyes and sighed. I knew this day would come, but I didn't expect you to find out this way. Hari crossed her arms. So you admit it's true? He lifted his gaze to hers, his expression more serious than ever. I can explain, but you have to be willing to hear everything, not just what these documents expose. Hari's heart pounded. Something told her that the truth would change everything between them. Tae-woo rose from his chair and walked to the window, gazing at the city below. He had known this moment would come, but facing Hari standing before him with eyes full of doubt and anger was harder than he had imagined. When I took over Jung Corporation, things weren't as simple as they seem now. My father left the company on the brink of collapse. The board demanded swift action, and I did what was necessary to ensure the survival of the empire he built. He turned to face her. That deal you found was part of it. Hari flipped through the documents again, trying to absorb the information. So you sold part of the company to a foreign group without the board's knowledge? He nodded slowly. Exactly. If I hadn't done it, Jung Corporation wouldn't exist today. But I made sure the conditions were favorable enough to retain control. Her eyes narrowed, her voice filled with emotion. And you didn't think your employees deserved to know? That the people who dedicate their lives to this company at least deserved the truth? Tae-woo ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. I did what had to be done, Hari, and I don't regret it. But I knew that if this ever came to light, it would cause problems. A chill ran down Hari's spine. So you knew this would surface eventually? Someone is trying to use this against you. He nodded slowly. And that's where you come in. We need to find out who's behind this before it's too late. Hari wasn't sure if she could trust him, but something inside her told her she was about to dive into a secret far bigger than she had imagined. The next few hours were a whirlwind of events. Hari couldn't shake the feeling that she was caught in something far bigger than she had anticipated. As she struggled to process Tae-woo's words, another anonymous email arrived, this time with a warning. If you stay by his side, you'll fall with him. A chill ran down Hari's spine. Tae-woo, upon reading the message, remained unfazed. They're tightening the noose, Hari. Whoever's behind this knows that you are the key to weakening me. She crossed her arms, trying to steady her breath. So, what's the next move? Tae-woo walked over to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a file. We need to find out who's manipulating this information and what their real goal is. I trust you, Hari. Will you help me? She held his gaze for a long moment, weighing the consequences of the decision she was about to make. Then finally she answered, I'm in, but if you're hiding anything else, I swear I'll be the first to take you down. Tae-woo smirked slightly, as if he appreciated her audacity. I wouldn't expect anything less from you. The investigation began that very night. Hari and Tae-woo combed through old emails, financial transactions, and communication records, searching for any clue about who might be behind the threats. As the hours passed, a crucial lead emerged. A former Young Corporation director, ousted years ago for fraud, had resurfaced in the business world, making deals with rival companies. His connection to the recent events was far too suspicious to ignore. Park Ji-hoon, Tae-woo muttered, drumming his fingers on the desk. I should have known he'd try something like this. Hari frowned. Who is he? Someone who would do anything to destroy me. And it looks like he's found the perfect moment to strike. Before they could devise a plan, Hari's phone rang an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. Hello? The voice on the other end was deep and menacing. You're playing with fire, Yoon Hari. If you keep meddling where you don't belong, you'll get burned. Her heart pounded. Tae-woo noticed the color drain from her face and stepped closer. Who was it? He asked. Hari hung up, her eyes locked on his. We're running out of time, Tae-woo. We need to act now, before it's too late. He nodded, resolute. Then let's finish this together. The battle was just beginning, and this time they couldn't afford to lose. The tension had reached its breaking point. Tae-woo and Hari were one step away from uncovering the truth behind the threats and the attempts to bring down Young Corporation. However, they knew that their next move could change everything forever. That night, Hari received an anonymous message with an address and a single line. Come alone if you want answers. Tae-woo insisted she shouldn't go, but Hari knew this was her last chance to uncover the whole truth. Wrapped in a long coat, she arrived at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Seoul. The place was engulfed in darkness, with only a few flickering lights hanging from the ceiling. As soon as she stepped inside, a voice echoed through the space. Do you really want to know the truth, Yoon Hari? She spun around quickly and saw Park Ji-hoon emerging from the shadows, a cold smile on his lips. What do you want from all this? Hari asked, keeping her stance firm. Ji-hoon chuckled. I don't want Young Corporation. I want revenge. Tae-woo destroyed my life, and now it's time for him to pay for what he did. Before Hari could respond, the warehouse doors burst open. Tae-woo entered, flanked by his security team. It's over, Ji-hoon, he said, his gaze sharp and unwavering. Ji-hoon smirked, but his eyes betrayed defeat. You may have won this time, Tae-woo, but don't think this is over. Moments later, the police arrived, taking Ji-hoon into custody. When everything was finally settled, Hari turned to Tae-woo, feeling the weight of everything they had been through. Is it really over? She asked softly. He sighed and nodded. Yes, thanks to you. A silence filled with meaning hung between them. Tae-woo stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. Hari, after everything that happened, do you still want to stay by my side? She hesitated for a moment, then smiled gently. I think we've proven that we make a good team. For the first time in a long while, Tae-woo smiled, and in that moment, they both knew that a new chapter was just beginning. In the days that followed, Young Corporation began to recover from the conspiracy's impact. Tae-woo called an emergency meeting to inform the shareholders of everything that had transpired. For the first time, he did not hide the mistakes of the past, but assured them that the company would move in a new direction. Hari, meanwhile, realized that she was no longer just an employee. Her influence within the company was growing, and her relationship with Tae-woo was becoming increasingly complex. One quiet evening, as they stood on the rooftop of the company headquarters, looking out over Seoul, he gently took her hand. I'm not the same man you met, Hari, and you've changed too. What happens next is up to us. She looked at him, feeling her heart race. Fate was finally in their hands.
You're my eternal blue.